parties.
Yeah.
You can't talk, and you mentioned, trust, in your comments there. You can't talk about relationships without, talking about trust. I mean, how do you build, trust in these relationships? I mean, in other words, is it, does trust just happen as a function of, working with someone for a long time, or are they things that you can, proactively do to, reach that quote unquote trusted partner, stage more quickly?
It's interesting. So obviously, if you've worked with someone for, a long time and you've built up that relationship and to a degree that reliance on each other as a result of the integrity associated to that relationship, trust is a derivative. And that is pretty much the obvious one, I would say, in terms of how you develop trust. There's this, sales component to it as well. And, someone early on in my life, told me there's two types of people that trust and people that you have to develop trust with. And really understanding not just the customer relationship, but the individuals responsible on the shipper side that are ultimately the ones making the decision, and try to assess as best you can the types of relationships that they're looking for. Really just going in with one approach and trying to force feed that approach from a relationship development standpoint, in my opinion, is just the wrong way. I would say it's probably like a coin flip. Half the time you're going to be right, half the time you're going to be wrong. And this is where I really lean on my on-site experience, specifically being domiciled in corporate offices for a significant amount of time, because the opportunity that you see there is not just one, how these internal organizations work and the variability of the resources and the roles and responsibilities on their side, but also potentially how some of our competitors, or in their situation, providers, come in and interact. And it's over time, it gets pretty obvious relative to the ones that really have one strategy, or the ones that are really coming in and trying to understand, legitimately trying to understand what the shipper is trying to do. And so if you don't have a pre-existing relationship and you don't have a body of work that you can point to and say that's consistent, that's integrity laden and predictable, it's really incumbent upon the person or individual that is both trying to sell in and potentially trying to develop the relationship to take an approach that is less about us and more about them, and really focus in on what it is that shipper is trying to solve, or the potential problem that shipper may have. Now, that may sound obvious, that may sound pretty straightforward, but in my opinion, it boils down to a couple key things. Number one, if you ask them about their strategy and you ask them about what it is they're trying to solve and they don't know, chances are it's probably not a good idea to keep pounding on that, because you're going to either disenfranchise them or you're going to push them away because they think you're trying to get after something maybe perhaps they're not prepared to talk about. So it's really, really important to walk in, be situationally aware on these ones without these relationships. And beyond that, really listen to some key factors. And over and above that, again, I go back to this sequencing. When you're an organization that has multiple services on a global basis, it's really easy to walk in and just talk about us for a solid hour and a half, completely ignoring everything or any of the signs that they may be pointing relative to their issues or what it is they're trying to solve. And you walk out thinking you did a great job, and they walk away saying they didn't even listen to the things that we had to do, or they don't even pick up on the symptoms or the challenges that are in front of us. And so essentially being able to walk in and understand and ask those types of questions is critical. I would also say that from a logistics service provider side, really understanding the constraints and maybe some of the commonalities on a vertical basis is critical. Leveraging that expertise and that knowledge that you have internally, assuming you have a vertical-based strategy and assuming you're gleaning insight from that vertical-based strategy, puts you in a unique position to walk in informed and perhaps kind of pull that conversation along, no different than what you're doing with me right now relative to this topic. And so when you start thinking about establishing trust out of the gate, I would say it's situational awareness. It's really focusing on them, less about us. Sequencing the things that, as you hear about their challenges that maybe are experiential on our side or service line driven on our side, and really populating some of that conversation or sprinkling some of that conversation with some vertical extracts on a macro level to really try to give that best practice knowledge sharing within the conversation that further drives not just the trust and the relationship development, but that subject matter expertise. And so from that, then you have the basis or the foundation to start developing those types of relationships. And in the end, I think it really boils down to doing what you say you're going to do, being as predictable as possible. And when challenges arise, really owning those challenges in a proactive manner, whereby continuously developing that level of trust, both in good as well as in bad conversations.